Chapter 7. Damsel to the Rescue. Clutching the latest installment of The Princess Maid, Fei Yin all but skipped out of the bookshop. She had been afraid that coming to Wuzhong City would have meant missing out on her favorite romantic series, but luckily she had been able to find a bookshop with a subscription to the wildly popular novels. Even so, the copy she had managed to obtain had been the very last one in the shop, and possibly the entire city. The impulse to open her prize and devour its content there and then was very tempting, but she managed to resist, knowing that she would enjoy the book all the more when reading it in the privacy of her own bedroom. Suddenly, the sound of something heavy hitting the ground drew her attention, and she turned to look in the direction of the noise, her guard up and ready for action. The bookshop was in a quieter part of the city, and with it being late in the evening, there were very few people about. As such, with the exception of herself, no one else saw the scene that was playing out on the street before her. A dozen men, all about Fei Yin's age, loomed over a fallen figure who was squirming away from them. Instinct told Fei Yin to go to the fallen man's aid, but she forced the impulse down and instead hid herself in an empty corner of the street to observe the situation further.
"Just hand it over and we'll let you go,"
said one of the standing men as he stepped forward and stared down menacingly at the fallen man.
"You'll let me go, all right. Let me go straight to hell,"
snarled the man on the ground, his voice defiant despite his predicament. Fei Yin had seen enough. The scene before her was obviously a robbery, and although she did not know the circumstances leading up to it, she was determined to put a stop to it. Subtly she channeled a wisp of power into the ring of Huo Qubing, and 3 slips of paper, each one the size of a playing card, appeared in her hand. Swiftly she activated the runes written on them and felt power surging into her body, even as the papers turned to ash. With her speed, strength, and fortitude supernaturally enhanced, Fei Yin leapt out of her hiding place and straight towards the robbers. As she stepped into action, she saw the fallen man reach into the breast pocket of his jacket and pull something out. With her enhanced senses, Fei Yin was able to identify the object as a miniature lidded cauldron the size of a man's palm. Immediately, she hastened her pace as she recognized this to be a refining cauldron used in alchemy. Although by no means an expert in the craft, Fei Yin knew its basic concepts and was aware of the tremendous amount of power required in the process. The amount of power an alchemist could control directly determines the quality of their products, and so every alchemist strives to operate at the highest possible level their abilities allow. Of course, working so close to their limits, it meant that the cauldrons they used in refining their pills and elixirs were constantly in danger of being destroyed. And whenever that happened, the results were always catastrophic. Judging by the way the cauldron in the man's hand was glowing with barely contained power, it was about to do exactly that. With eye-blurring speed, Fei Yin knocked the cauldron out of the man's hand and towards his would-be assailants before scooping him up in her arms to flee in the opposite direction. With the aid of the rune magic coursing through her body, carrying the man was effortlessly easy, and she was soon dozens of yards away. Yet even from that distance, she could feel the force and heat from the exploding cauldron, and knew without a doubt that she had only avoided serious injury by having her body magically enforced. Eventually the explosion receded, and an eerie silence settled in, like the calm after a storm. Straining her senses Fei Yin explored her surroundings, and only when certain that the danger had passed did she move from her position of crouching over the man in her arms. Taking advantage of their close proximity, she studied the man in detail and was surprised by what she found. More of a boy than a man, he was perhaps a year or two younger than herself and had a pale complexion that suggested a lot of his time was spent away from the sun. A strong smell of medicinal herbs and chemicals emanated from his body, confirming her earlier suspicions of his occupation. Right now he had his eyes tightly closed, a normal reaction given the circumstances that added an air of vulnerability about him that reminded Fei Yin of a startled rabbit.
Young sir, it's all right now,
she said, taking care to use her gentlest voice. Slowly, the man opened his eyes, and the look of frightened confusion on his face further tugged at Fei Yin's protective instincts. Sudden comprehension entered the man's face as he realized his rescuer was a girl, barely older than himself, and he turned an embarrassing shade of red. Forcing down the urge to pinch those apple-red cheeks, Fei Yin instead helped him to his feet, and together they turned to survey the aftermath. Although she had been expecting it, the scene of devastation still shocked her. The men closest to the explosion had been blown to bits, not one of which was larger than her fist. Those who had been further behind had fared little better, their bodies burnt and mangled to such an extent that it left no doubt as to whether they had survived or not. Fei Yin let out a horrified shriek before reaching back to fumble around her belt and pull out a handful of burnt pages that crumbled in her hand. She had tucked her novel there for safekeeping before carrying out the rescue, but had completely forgotten about it until now. Although her body and clothes had been protected by the rune she had activated, the protection had not extended to the book, resulting in its current state of destruction. Pain and sadness clouded her face as she mourned the loss, but a timid voice brought her back to her senses.
Miss, may I take a look?
Asked the man she had rescued as he stretched out a hand. For a moment, Fei Yin was tempted to snap at him, but held her tongue. He had not intended to destroy her book, and his actions in resisting his assailants had been commendable. No, he did not deserve her wrath. Reluctantly, she handed the tattered pages over and watched as he carefully picked his way through them. A smile appeared on his lips, and he snapped his gaze back up to meet hers.
Miss, I have a copy of this book.
You have a copy of Princess's Maid?
Said Fei Yin in disbelief. The man nodded vigorously, then suddenly blushed again at having his unmanly taste in books exposed. Instinctively, Fei Yin wanted to grab his hands and ask for the book, but she forced down the impulse. Instead, she took a step back and composed herself.
Sir, I could not ask you for such a boon,
She said reluctantly.
Miss, it is nothing compared to the service you have done for me.
but I don't even know your name.
Ding Tian, family name Lin, at your service.
He said with a bow.
Fei Yin, family name Li, at your service.
Fei Yin replied.
Now will you accept my gift?
Asked Ding Tian. Fei Yin opened her mouth to decline, but could not say the words. Instead, she looked down shyly and nodded her head.